That is correct, Mayor.
I'm gonna go look for my clip-on now. Just add it.
I'm not.
Will you pull your mic just a little bit closer? Yeah. There you go. Thank you.
Well, shall we get started? 9:04 a.m. Special meeting of City Council and Redevelopment Successor Agency, Clear Lake City Hall Chambers. Thank you all for viewing today's City Council meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 9:04, April 16, 2020. As a reminder, if you're on our Zoom meeting as a partial participant, please put yourself on mute unless you're speaking. You get a lot of background noise here. We are currently live streaming this meeting on the Lake County XTD live stream YouTube channel. You can submit your comments in writing throughout the meeting by emailing the city clerk, or email address can be found on our website. You can also submit your comments through our town hall portal, also found on the city's website. To begin, Madam Clerk, can I please have a roll call?
Councilmember Purdock.
Here.
Councilmember Overton.
Here.
Vice Mayor Slutin.
Here.
And Mayor Kramer.
Here.
And Councilmember Harris is absent.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. For those of us here, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. If you want to follow on Zoom, as we've done in the past, put your speaker on mute. Thank you. Councilmember Overton, do you want to lead us? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. We're going to dispense with the invocation for this special meeting. Okay, while we're operating under these new meeting guidelines, I will explain our meeting procedures. Agenda items will be open for public comment before final action is taken. Citizens wishing to comment on any agenda item should email the city clerk or submit their comments through our town hall portal. Comments received will be read aloud by either myself or a staff member during the agenda item. Because we are operating in a virtual setting, I will call on my colleagues one at a time to speak. After council deliberation, I will call for a roll call vote by the city clerk. If a remote participant encounters technical difficulties, I will ask that we continue discussing the item and the participant can rejoin when the technical difficulty is resolved. Again, if you are a participant who is not speaking, please mute your computer to prevent distractions from the current speaker. Okay, adoption of the agenda. City Manager Clerk, are there any modifications to the agenda?
No modifications.
No modifications. Thank you. Can I have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda?
Also move.
Move is made by Councilmember Overton. Have a second?
Second. Second.
Second is made by Councilmember Purdock. Roll call vote, please, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Overton.
Aye.
Councilmember Purdock.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Slutin.
Aye.
And Mayor Kramer.
Aye. Motion passes. Okay, I'm now going to read a proclamation declaring April 12th to April 18th, 2020 as Animal Care and Control Appreciation Week. National Animal Control and Care and Control Appreciation Week, April 12th, April 12th through April 18th, 2020. Whereas the hardworking women, men and women of animal control and care and control have real difficulty with that. Risk their lives and devote huge amounts of personal time and resources while they serve the public under like other public safety and law enforcement agencies empowered with the same duties, and whereas animal control, care and control personnel risk life and limb by going out into the public to protect the welfare of helpless animals and pets that are rescued from injury, disease, abuse, and starvation. And whereas animal care and control personnel provide the essential community functions of enforcing animal control laws, protecting the public from diseases such as rabies, and educating the public on proper care of the community's pets. And whereas these hardworking and dedicated animal care and control employees should be honored by having the whole community say thank you for helping when no one else could or would even know how to. And whereas National Animal Control Care and Control Appreciation Week is to endorse an annual effort to celebrate and promote professionalism in the animal care and control field on the national stage. And therefore, be it resolved that the City Council of the City of Clear Lake declares the week of April 12th through 18th, 2020 to be National Animal Care and Control Appreciation Week in the City of Clear Lake to inform the community of the services provided by animal care and control, and to educate as many people as possible of the immense effort expended daily by their animal control officers. Dated this 27th day of April 2020 and signed by myself as mayor.
Do you mind if I make a remark real quick?
You may.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to the council, and then also to the city manager and Public Works and everybody else involved. You know, we've been undertaking a big effort with planning for our animal shelter project. And I know that the staff, you know, it's nice to be appreciated this way. I know, though, that they appreciate your guys' investment in them with getting the facilities updated and everything else. And they recognize, too, that that's a balancing act between doing all that plus providing for all the people within the city and all the other demands that are out there. So we thank you as well.
Moving on.
Mayor Kramer, just along that line, I just wanted to give a quick update since Chief White brought it up. I had told you that we were frustrated with our USDA funding, a lot of additional requirements that came along. We talked to the state architect's office and USDA folks last week. I was frustrated. I was ready to pull the plug on the whole thing. Chief White made one last-ditch effort, and I believe was able to rescue the funding, and we're expecting to have those dollars soon for that. So thank you to USDA, yes. So
I'm a little confused on why the state architect is.
it is a little confusing. I'm not sure why they have it set up that way, but they're, I think, primarily responsible for making sure that the projects comply with ADA requirements, unless Chief White has anything else he wants to add. So.
Yeah, that's correct. In the reference where it says USD or state architect, it's actually USDA's state assigned architect to California, but it's all about compliance with their regulations. And the biggest thing that happened was originally we entered into this project as an equipment grant because the units are modular, they're all self-contained. It switched to a construction, so as you can imagine, a whole bunch more regulations came into play, et cetera. So. No, it just carries the same name, but it's actually USDA's state architect.
They're equally frustrating to work with, though.
All items listed under the consent agenda are considered to be routine in nature and will be approved by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a member of council or the audience requests otherwise, or if staff has requested a change in their adoption of the agenda, in which case the item will be removed for further separate consideration. Any item so removed will be taken up following the motion to approve the agenda. There's only one consent item. Is there any questions from council? And I would accept the motion to approve the consent items.
I move that we adopt approve the consent agenda as presented. Second.
Motion has been made by Vice Mayor Slotin, seconded by Councilmember Purdock. Madam Clerk, can we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Overton,
Aye.
Councilmember Purdock,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Slutin,
Aye.
and Mayor Kramer.
Aye. Motion passes.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
could we just clarify from the clerk that we didn't receive any public comment on the consent calendar?
I apologize. I should have asked. Is there any public comment on the consent agenda?
There is no public comment on the consent agenda item.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, let's move on to public hearings. During the April 27th, 2020 City Council meeting, comment on agenda items will be accepted via email through the city's town hall portal. If you would like to comment remotely, please follow the procedures and protocols below. And there are a list of them. I assume these are on our website. Or do I need to read these through again?
The item is on our website and on our agenda.
All right. So I'm not going to read each one of them. Where we are. Okay, our first item is a public hearing regarding the purchase and sale. It's item number 3, sale of various former redevelopment agency properties located at 36th Avenue in Clear Lake, 15786, 15796, 15806, 15846, and 15847 36th Avenue. So, that's where I was. Are there any questions or, I'm sorry, General City Manager Flora? A little out of context here, but City Manager Flora, can you go over this item, please?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, members of the council, as you're aware, the redevelopment agency owned a number of properties, the most prominent of which, of course, are the airport property, Austin Resort, and several other larger commercial properties. But there are a variety of smaller residential properties throughout the city that are still held by the successor agency to the redevelopment agency. So over the last year or so, talking with a number of developers trying to encourage some type of housing development, we've provided information on the publicly owned properties throughout the city and got some interest in several properties that are held that are along 36th Avenue. And so those were listed for sale pursuant to the city's real property dissolution or sale policy. And we received an offer on these properties. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with this area. This is off 36th Avenue to the west of Phillips. There is a map in your packet that shows the 5 different APN numbers there. And this is a section where we have some particularly significant drainage problems where the road itself, it's a gravel road, kind of ventures around and out of the public right-of-way and across one of the parcels in order to navigate that section of the area. So we had a market analysis done on the value of these properties. They were listed for $35,000 for all of them. And the offer that came in from the housing developer was for $18,000. So these 5 APNs actually have 18 lots of record. Some of them have been combined into one parcel number, but there is the possibility of building 18 homes on these 5 assessors parcel numbers. And that is the intention of this developer. So with the $18,000 offer, the developer has also offered to improve the drainage and put in a new paved road from Phillips Avenue to the corner of Eureka, right there along 36. And that way the road can be straightened out, the drainage can be fixed, and 18 homes can be developed in that area. So those are kind of the highlights. What we're asking today is that you authorize me to execute the final purchase and sale agreement with Alpine Design Build for these properties. If that does happen, then this purchase and sale agreement will be forwarded to the Lake County Redevelopment Agency Oversight Board, which will have final approval on the agreement. And I'm sure the council recalls all this, but just for the public's information, the idea of this oversight board is to make sure that the maximum value can be achieved from the assets, and then they oversee the distribution of any proceeds to all the taxing entities, which would include the county, the city, the fire districts, the schools, et cetera. And so in this case, I haven't done the calculations yet on what the city is likely to receive from $18,000, but it's going to be a very small amount, of course. But these have been off the tax rolls for a number of years, and of course the long-term financial benefit of having 18 new homes in that section of the city not only would be great to provide more quality housing within our city boundaries, but also is going to provide additional property tax revenue that will be much greater over time, of course, than any proceeds of the $18,000. So one thing I did fail to mention, we did get the developer shared a proposal of the cost of the improvements of the road and drainage, which was $79,000 for him to construct those. Those were reviewed by our Public Works Director, City Engineer, and they met with this developer as well, and those improvements would meet the city standard. So just wanted to make sure that was clear. And then kind of finally, the final purchase agreement, we would envision that there would be 2 additional items, or there would be our recommendation, 2 additional items be added to this particular offer. One, that no certificates of occupancy for any of the new homes would be issued until the road and drainage improvements were completed. We would allow them to start building homes on some of these lots if they wanted to get started on that, but no certificates of occupancy would be issued until those improvements were finalized. And then a reversion clause would be added to the agreement that if the road and drainage improvements were not completed within 12 months, that the property would revert back to the successor agency. So I believe that's my report, unless any of the council members have any questions.
Before I go on to that, some council members, I should also state that the council is now acting and seated as the Clear Lake Redevelopment Successor Agency, and Mr. Flores is acting as Deputy Director of that. So with that, I'll ask Councilwoman Norton, do you have any questions?
I do, thank you. I'm glad to see this happening. As far as I'm concerned, you can give him the property as long as we get this stuff going. I did not notice in here, and maybe I missed it, pavement on that road? Are they going to do any pavement? It just says drainage. I didn't see.
Yes.
Oh. How about that? Is that better?
Yes, they have agreed to do the drainage improvements and pave that section from Phillips to Eureka.
I think this is great. We need, that area is really bad anyway. I think this is going to be a great improvement. Is this going to be moderate income housing, or have they made that decision?
The current plan is that they would be market rate. They're looking in this area. So this particular developer is interested in doing some other projects in the city, but, he feels like that they can come in and where they have an area where they can be in kind of one place and build several of them, they can bring their costs down. So as I understand, they're looking at probably in the $250,000 range for these homes.
Well, I think this is great, and plus it's going to bring some jobs, I hope, to the community. If they build all 18, would be nice if they could get that going. So I think this is a great idea. Thank you.
Councilmember Purdock.
No comment. I echo what Councilmember Overton just said.
Thank you, Councilmember Purdock. Vice Mayor Slotin.
I applaud these gentlemen that want to do this. Nothing but good can come from that. New houses, tax revenue, it's just an all-out good thing. Hopefully they start looking at some additional parcels beyond these. Thanks.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Slotin. My only question or comment would be, what's the size of these individual lots? Are they 50 by 100 foot lots, or what are they?
I don't recall off the top of my head. I think they're at least that large. You can kind of see from the map that they're pretty consistent within most of the. I don't believe there's any that are smaller than 50 by 100, but I'd have to follow up with you on that information.
All right. Well, as long as they meet the minimum size.
They do, and they have utilities there, so there shouldn't be any concern with the lot size.
Madam Clerk, are there any questions from the audience or public?
We have not received any public comments on this item.
Okay. Thank you. I'll bring it back to council. Councilmember Overton, did you have any additional comments, or you're good? Councilmember Purdock, do you have any now?
No, I do not.
Vice Mayor Slotin?
No additional comments.
Then I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to see that we authorize the city manager and successor agency director to execute a purchase and sale agreement with Alpine Design Build Incorporated for property located at 15786, 15796, 15806, 15846, and 15847, all on 36th Avenue in the city of Clear Lake, and adopt resolution Sam Adam -2020-02, recommending the Lake County Redevelopment Agency Oversight Board approve the agreement.
Second.
I have a motion made by Councilmember Purdock and seconded by Vice Mayor Slotin. Madam Clerk, may we have a roll call?
Member Purdock.
Aye.
Member Overton.
Aye.
Vice Chair Slotin.
Aye.
And Chair Kramer.
Aye. Motion passes. Moving on to item number 4, consideration of extending or repealing urgency ordinance 239-2020 relating to a temporary moratorium on residential tenant evictions during COVID-19 emergency. City Manager Flora, please proceed with the staff report.
City Attorney Jones is going to provide the staff report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. So now we're switching back gears as city council agency as opposed to the successor agency. We've talked about this a couple of times. This is the eviction moratorium that the council voted on a few meetings back. We are now getting close to that 45-day time where it will lapse if the council doesn't take action to extend it. There are 3 options here. This still requires a 4/5 vote, and I believe we're missing a member, so it means it'll be a 4-0 vote. If you want to do one of 2 things. So if you want to extend it for another, you can do it for 10 months. We need a 4-0 vote to do that. If you want to repeal it, we also need a 4-0 vote to do that. And that would be that it ends today. If neither can be reached, or we're not sure what we don't have enough votes there, or the council doesn't want to go with either of those two options, on May 3rd, which is the 45th day, it'll just expire. And at that point, the moratorium that the council voted on, which protects tenants from getting evicted for non-payment of rent related to COVID issues, would no longer be in effect. But an important part of this is that since the council did pass this moratorium, it is worth noting that Governor Newsom in Executive Order N3720 did establish a moratorium on residential evictions. It is similar to the City of Clear Lake's moratorium, but it is different. And there is an opportunity if the city wants to have, as we talked about this before, you can have both of them going on simultaneously, though the goal is the same. Both are protecting residents who are negatively impacted financially because of COVID-19 from being evicted. The difference is ours goes ours is a little bit shorter. It ends on May 19th. The governor's goes till May 31st. The other thing the governor's order does is it really more is stopping the eviction process in the court system and prohibiting law enforcement from actually executing writs of eviction, whereas our ordinance would say that landlords cannot even start the eviction process, that if those people met those certain thresholds that we talked about in the last meeting, that the process can't even be begun. So I could see the council deciding, well, look, we've already, the governor's got this in place, the protections are there, we don't need to continue to be involved, or council, as it said a few meetings ago, can decide, you know what, we might as well have both our ordinance and the order from the governor going on concurrently, and that would be fine. So those are your three options: either extend, repeal, or do nothing and allow it to expire at the end of this week on May 3rd, which I think is Sunday. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Councilmember Overton? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I was just going to clarify a question for City Attorney Jones. My understanding was it would be your preference if there's the votes of the council for the council to actually, if you didn't want to move forward with the ordinance, your preference would be to take action to repeal rather than just let it expire. Is that correct?
I would. I just don't know if you've got to be unanimous with 4 votes. But yes, I think if the council can be in concurrence on this, they should do one of the two things: try to extend it, or repeal it, and then it ends today. We don't just let it why let it linger for 6 or 7 more days if the decision is we don't need this in place because the governor's order is there.
And then finally, if I may, I did. So Councilmember Harris was unable to make it. I asked him if there was any feedback on any of the items he wanted to provide to me. He did provide feedback on 2 items, this being one of them, and just for what it's worth, his preference is that we stop the local moratorium. So
That we
Maybe
stop it?
Can I add one more thing, Mr. Flora? And that is with regard to if the council wants to repeal, I do think there's a benefit of that too, in the sense of, although I don't think there is litigation or liability over this overtly yet, if someone's going to take that pressure from it, it might as well be the state as opposed to the city. I've been watching these other cities that have done ordinances and seeing if because there's been a number of lawsuits that have been filed related to other implementations of county restrictions. I have not yet seen it on the eviction side, but as somebody who's your city attorney, if the state's willing to do the same thing that we want to do and take on all of that potential liability, maybe there is a benefit of doing that. But I guess what I'm not saying to you is I don't think there is overt risk of litigation at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Councilmember Overton, questions?
Well, I just think that since the state has stepped up and did this, I do think that we should just repeal ours and let the state take on. I agree. I haven't heard of anybody even using this anyway. Most people have gotten their unemployment plus the extra $600. A lot of the people who are getting Social Security are still continuing on. So I think that for us to continue on with possible litigations in the future just isn't necessary. So I would say that we should repeal this.
Thank you, Councilmember Overton. Councilmember Purdock?
I concur with recommendations and with Councilmember Overton.
Vice Mayor Slotin?
I also concur if the state is willing to take on this liability, and if they considering to continue this till May 31st, I think we should have a better clarification on what's going to happen with this COVID-19.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Slotin. Madam Clerk, are there any public comment?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we've received one public comment on this item. We received a comment from Terry Stewart, and if you'd like, I'd go ahead and read that.
Sure. He went to the trouble of writing it. Let's read it.
All right. Mr. Terry Stewart says, I own rental property in the city. I always work with my tenants in times of difficulty, usually to my financial detriment. My concern with the eviction moratorium is the potential financial hardship is only being shifted from the tenant to the landlord. In most cases, in my experience, once tenants get behind, they never get caught up. Meanwhile, all government agencies continue to expect me to pay my bills directly due to them or the bills that they have mandated me to pay, such as property taxes and garbage service. The tenant also expects me to keep the property functioning, things like toilets, water heaters, etc. Also, please keep in mind that the eviction process itself can take a minimum of 6 to 8 weeks to wind its way through the legal process. Also, the question may be moot at this point since I'm guessing that the courts are not functioning at this time either. I therefore ask you to not extend this ordinance, or if you do, add some kind of exemption that if the tenants had been in arrears prior to the shutdowns of March 19th, 2020, that the landlord may start the eviction process once the tenant reaches a certain amount of days in arrears. I would suggest 60 days. You may have noticed that, like other areas in our state, we have a shortage of affordable rental properties. Each time you, as government officials, take actions that damage landlords financially, many of us conclude that we are no longer valuable to the community and exit the business, exacerbating the affordability issue. Also, please bear in mind that most landlords are everyday folks who own a small number of units. Many of us are now in a state of financial distress that equals what our tenants are experiencing, or even worse, since some of them are now making more money being laid off than they were when working, due to enhanced unemployment benefits and government stimulus money. Thank you. That concludes Mr. Stewart's statement.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I'll bring it back to council. Councilmember Overton, any additional comments?
No additional. No. I agree with him.
Councilmember Purdock, any comments?
No, sir.
Vice Mayor Slotin?
No additional comments.
Okay, I would agree with our City Attorney Jones that the state's got this in place also, and I don't see the reason for us to continue with this emergency ordinance. So I would be certainly in favor of repealing it. That said, I will now ask for a motion either to extend it or to repeal it. Or do we have to vote on both?
To repeal, right?
You just pick one. So if you sounds
All
like
right.
the council goes with the repeal, you just make a motion to repeal. And since that is also an urgency ordinance, you don't need a first and a second motion. It'll go into effect immediately.
Okay, thank you. May I have a motion to either extend or repeal?
Mr. Mayor, I would like to offer that we repeal the urgency ordinance 239-2020 relating to the temporary moratorium on residential tenant evictions during COVID-19 emergency.
I'll second.
Motion has been made by Councilmember Purdock and seconded by Councilmember Overton. Madam Clerk, may I have a roll call to repeal the ordinance, just to make that clear?
Councilmember Overton.
Aye.
Councilmember Purdock.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Slutin.
Aye.
Mayor Kramer.
Aye. Motion to repeal the emergency ordinance has passed. Next item, 5, is an authorization to lease 2 trucks, a 2021 Kenworth water truck and a 2021 Kenworth 10-yard dump truck. City Manager Flora, could you proceed with the report?
I'll just give a brief overview and then turn over to Public Works Director Goodman. So sometime last fall, we came and talked to the council and discussed this issue with our water truck and our largest dump truck both being now out of compliance with state air quality regulations. There's a need to make some kind of upgrade, and at that time the council discussed it because we discussed a number of different options, buying used, trying to fix the ones we have with new engines and so forth. And the recommendation at that time was to the extent feasible, move forward with upgrading with new equipment. And so Public Works has been working on this for a while, getting a number of different quotes and whatnot. I think I might have mentioned this to the council previously, but due to sales tax revenue concerns, due to the COVID pandemic, my direction to them was to just get quotes on leases rather than purchases at this time. And so that's what's before you, and Mr. Goodman will go over the numbers, but I just wanted to kind of give that background before we got started.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. So as Administrator Flora has suggested, we've spent a good deal of time on this, looked at different brands. We settled on the offering from the Kenworth company, Kenworth dealer, to initially we were looking at purchase, but at the direction of Mr. Flora, we have looked strictly at leasing vehicles because we can defer instead of spending $400,000+ all in one lump sum right now. We can pay for this over time, and that'll allow us to move forward with the construction projects, the maintenance projects that we need to be getting underway as the year is warming up. We've looked at several different types of leases. Operating lease, which is basically you're going to lease the vehicle and give it back at the end of the lease, and you could buy it at that point, but it's a lower rate, monthly rate, and the buyout would be, of course, much higher after the 5 years. Track lease has a different level of buyout. If you want a 20% buyout, your lease is going to be lower. Higher. Your monthly lease will be higher. If you want a 30% buyout, your lease payment would be lower. And then the option that we chose to go with was the tax-exempt lease purchase, which basically it's similar to just buying those vehicles on a 5-year contract. So at the end of the 5-year lease, we would own the vehicles. At the end of that time, we anticipate those vehicles would have about 20,000 miles on them. In the life of a heavy-duty diesel truck like these two are, 20,000 miles is broken in. They can run for 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 miles. And so they'd be very young, and we anticipate that we would continue to use those vehicles for many years to come. And so while it appears that at $7,000 a month on that lease payment, or $7,100 a month on those lease payments. That appears pretty large. We would probably have 15 years after those 5 years. We'd have 15 years of no payments at all. And so then the monthly lease payment comes down to $1,700 a month. The annual cost is, instead of what we're looking at here, would be more like $21,000 a year to lease the 2 trucks, which is a more realistic way of looking at it, the cost of operating those vehicles over time and owning those vehicles over time. And so it's our recommendation that council move to approve this lease and authorize the city administrator to sign the lease agreement.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just add one final thing, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Goodman, but I believe these trucks are both currently in stock, and so if there is authorization given, they would just have to be sent to be outfitted with the dump body and tank, and then could be delivered hopefully in a relatively short period of time. But at this point, unless some action's taken, the city can't really continue any grading of gravel roads. So
Can't really continue with what?
any grading of our gravel roads.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Goodman. Council Member Overton, do you have questions?
No, I think this is something I think that we need to do. Sounds like the best deal we can get. I really like the deal. It sounds good. And I, because you're right, I mean, diesels last for way longer than anything else, so I think we have a long life with these ones here. I think this is a good way to go. We keep purchasing older stuff, and it's, we're spending a lot of money doing that over the years that I've been here, so I think this is the smartest thing we could do. So I appreciate the research, and I think it's going to be a good thing.
Councilmember Purdock.
No comments. I support the action.
Vice Mayor Slotin.
I support the lease arrangements. It's a 2.5% financing while we're preserving cash. It's important that we have a cash because we don't know what the outcome of COVID-19 will be. And so to preserve cash, to lease it, to do these with a lease is the financially responsible way to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Slotin. Just one question. These funds will come out of general or Measure V funds?
We were going to split it between gas tax and Measure V, but there wouldn't be any general fund dollars.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Mayor, real quick, so this is another item that Councilmember Harris
yes,
wanted to share that he supports this lease arrangement.
He supports it as well. Okay. Madam Clerk, are there any public comments?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have received one public comment on this item.
Would you please read it?
From John W. Andrus. And his statement is, to spend $7,100 on truck leases smacks of total incompetence by the board when there are more urgent needs, i.e. road infrastructure. California Air Resource Board is out of control. First, you should be looking for grant monies. Paying $426,000 for a 5-year lease, you could buy some pretty fancy trucks. I will await your response on PEG TV. Regards, John W. Andrus.
Thank you, Mr. Andrus, for your comments. I'll bring it back to council now. Council Member Overton.
Regarding the public comment, I hope he realizes that diesels are definitely more money and that these are not just pickup trucks, that these are water trucks and dump trucks. And I remember the first time it came to me, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. There's no way I'm going to spend this kind of money. But I did my research. And as we did in the past, buy used vehicles because of the cost. It actually cost us more money. If you figure up the repairs and everything that has happened, it just cost us so much more money to go that way. I wish we would have went this way from the beginning. And I know it sounds like a lot of money, and I agree, but we can't do our road projects if we don't have these. So I think that public needs to realize that it's I'd love to have more roads done too with this money, but unfortunately, we can't do anything if we don't have the vehicles to help us do those. So I just want him to understand that this is not a waste of money, and yes, there are important things, but this is road money that in order for us to get the roads done, we have to have the equipment. It is what it is, unfortunately.
Thank you, Councilmember Overton. City Manager Flora, you have an additional
I
comment?
just wanted to add one additional comment. I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but I believe it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $20,000 that we spent last season renting both dump trucks and water trucks, because the two existing ones that we have were broken down for periods of the year. And doing those short-term rentals, we went ahead and spent the money because we needed to keep grading and maintaining those roads, but I mean, that's not a good long-term solution. And of course, the expectation is with newer equipment, that type of scenario would be avoided.
Thank you, City Manager Flora. Those are good points. Councilmember Purdock.
Again, I concur. This is the best way to spend the money. It is fiscally responsible to do it this way. And as many have pointed out, social media and the like, we have the need to repair the streets within the Clear Lake city limits. So I'm happy we're moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Purdock. Vice Mayor Slotin.
I have no additional comments. Like I said earlier, it's the fiscally right thing to do, preserve cash, and these are great terms for a lease for 2.5% money. That's cheap.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Slotin. And I also concur. I realize that $400,000 is a lot of money, but as pointed out by City Manager Flora, we've probably spent more than that on temporary fixes just to keep these things going. The Tier 5 requirements now leave us no choice but to upgrade, regardless what one may think of California's air quality laws. We have no choice. I think this is well-researched and well-documented and well-supported. I thank you, Mr. Goodman, for your work on this, and Mr. Flora for your work on it. That said, I will now entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make the motion that we authorize the purchase lease agreement with Kenmore and authorize our city manager to sign.
Second.
I think a motion was made by Councilmember Overton, and I believe it was seconded by Vice Mayor Slotin. City Clerk, may we have a roll call, please, Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Overton?
Aye.
Councilmember Purdock?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Slutin?
Aye.
Mayor Kramer?
Aye. Motion passes. Moving on to item number 6, authorization to purchase 2 trailer-mounted emergency 70 kW generators with funds from the 2019 Cal OES grant. City Manager Flora, can you proceed with the report?
Mr. Goodwin will present the staff report on this item.
Mr. Mayor, council members, so what we're looking at here is part of the Cal OES grant that the city received in 2019. That grant was for a number of different items, including 2 large generators. Some of the items we've already purchased, or we're in the process of purchasing smaller items, smaller generators, light towers, things like that. We're getting new quotes, or up-to-date quotes on other items. The 2 smaller generators have been ordered. We expect to pick those up on Wednesday, and so they will be in-house and ready to go should we need them. They are 10 kilowatt generators, and so should be useful in a number of different locations. Now back to this specific item, we had $120,000 budgeted for 2 small generators, and I did quite a bit of looking and research to find the best deal that I could, and I talked to experts about who had the best equipment and what equipment statistically appeared to be the most durable. And this is the equipment that came most highly recommended, was the high power HRIW 70, which is a 70-watt generator. It's diesel powered, has a large fuel tank on the trailer underneath it. It's trailer mounted, and is capable of running and running and running without any problems. It's considered, or it's rated as a primary generator, which means that it could be the sole source of power for an institution that can't be hooked up to the grid. And so with that kind of rating, if power is down for a week, if power is down for 2 weeks, as we had last year, these generators won't have any problem with handling the workload. They're rated for that kind of use. And they can be switched over to be a backup generator as well. As I said, they're both trailer mounted, and so we can take them where we need them. And one other thing that we have chosen to pay for an option is to be able to hook these up and run them parallel. And so rather than, if we need them in 2 locations, we can do that. But if we have one large location, say a big well or something like that, that produces a lot of water for the city, and one of our water providers doesn't have power for that, we could actually hook these together in parallel and power a pretty good sized well. And we felt that was an option that we wanted to have in case we needed a large amount of power going into one facility. And this is just a cash purchase through Global Power Supply LLC, Santa Barbara, California.
Okay. One thing, did you say that it is dual power capable?
I'm not sure what the question
Diesel
is.
and
No, it is not dual fuel.
Not dual fuel.
No, it's just diesel.
Okay. Thank you.
The 2 small
Council
generators, however, are dual fuel.
I'm sorry?
The 2 small generators that we've purchased
Oh,
are
they
dual
are.
fuel,
Okay, they're propane or
or gasoline.
gasoline.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Overton, do you have questions?
I'm just curious that, what type of plug-in, because I know that they had to put the switch in at the community center. Is that something that a facility that these would hook up to, let's say the water company or something needed them, do they have to have that special hookup also?
Yes.
So then we would have to make sure that our public works yard and everything has those type of hookups, because those are kind of expensive too. I found out as they were going on. Kind of seemed really high to me, but when I seen how much work goes into it, I realized that's so is that something that we're going to be looking to also do? Is putting in switches in different places for us to use in case we need to use these, or?
Talking about transfer switches.
Yeah, the transfer switches.
It wasn't anticipated as part of our grant application or this level of funding. I mean, the example of the water districts was brought up. I mean, they have generator backup. Some of their generators are, as I understand, aging, and so the thought was, if something like that went down, or if ours went down here, the existing facilities that we have I think there was the capability just to plug them in without adding a transfer switch. Now, like the public works yard and places like that, they don't have that existing capability, so we'd have to find an alternative for that. So, or like the schools or things like that, I don't think most of their facilities have the transfer switches. But at least, during these events, even making requests of PG&E for additional backup generation, there's a lot of requests for those resources, and the funding was made available through the state, and we felt like having our own redundancy would certainly be in our community's best interest.
I agree, because we've been sitting on this board with PG&E, regarding some generators and stuff like that. So I think it would be good for us to have our own in case we need to generate our own town through the PG&E office right here. So, I think it's great. Thank you.
Councilmember Purdock, questions?
No questions or comments, sir. It's a good purchase.
Vice Mayor Sloden, any questions, comments?
So these generators are a backup for the generators that we already have at City Hall and the community center?
Yes, that's correct, or any other community facilities that, needed to have one. Like if, one of the generators at one of the water companies went down, we'd be able to.
I believe that Golden State has their own backup generators. Does the other two water districts have those too, or do we know?
Yeah, all of them have some level of backup generation. As I understand, I mean, they've been kind of scrambling and trying to upgrade some of their generators, so I'm not sure what the current status is now, but I know some of the generators that they used, at least last year, were, quite old, and even some of the newer ones in other areas of the county last year, Mr. Goodman mentioned the primary status of the generators. Some of the ones that are designed to be backups that ran some of the sewer systems and water systems in other areas of the county, after running for 4 or 5 days, they weren't designed for that, and they were starting to fail. So you never know, but the resources were available, and we feel like it sets us up well to be as redundant as possible in our community to have something like this.
Great. So we're building some redundancy in the whole system. So I like that, especially if it's a grant from Cal OES. So great.
Yeah, just to reiterate, again, no monies will come out of general funds. This is strictly grant money, correct?
Thank you.
Okay. Madam Clerk, are there public comments?
Mr. Mayor, there are no public comments on this item.
Thank you. Bringing it back, Councilmember Overton, any additional comments or questions?
No additional comments.
Councilmember Purdock,
No, sir.
Vice Mayor Slotin.
No additional comments.
Thank you. Okay.
Mayor Kramer, before we move forward with the motion, I did want to point out, and I'm not 100% clear on this, but maybe Mr. Goodman can address whether this particular purchase is through any type of purchasing collaborative, or do we need to ask the council to waive public bidding requirements on this?
No, this is not through a purchasing organization or collaborative state. It's not on state bid. We did look at that, and we even looked at used equipment. We looked at a number of different things and felt like this was the best deal that we could get, considering all the all the options that were out there. And so we did not do a formal bidding process. I guess I would have to say that.
So we need to waive that in our motion.
Would request that if the council wants to support this, that they waive the public bidding requirements.
Okay. I am ready to entertain a motion with additional comments.
Okay, I'd like to make the motion to.
I move that we.
Wait a minute.
That's okay, let him go ahead.
Yeah.
Let him go ahead.
All right, Vice Mayor Slotin, Councilmember Overton is waiving her.
I move that we authorize the purchase of the two 70 kV generators from the grant funding from Cal OES and waive the competitive bidding process.
Okay, motion has been made by Vice Mayor Slotin and seconded by Councilmember Overton. Madam Clerk, can we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Overton?
Aye.
Councilmember Purdock?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Putin?
Aye.
Mayor Kramer?
Aye. Measure passes. There being no further business of the council, we are now adjourned at 10:01 a.m. Thanks, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Okay, back to work. I think those generators got a great idea, so I'm glad we got them on. That was awesome.
But there's a 14-week lead time, so we wanted to try and get them ordered as soon as possible.
Have them here before the fire.